Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel back in time, not just by a few hundred years, but deep into the human story, to a place that feels both alien and intimately, uncannily familiar. Imagine, we are somewhere on the wide, sun-drenched plains of what will one day be called Africa, about 100,000 years ago. Before you lies a sea of grass, shimmering in the heat, stretching to a horizon broken only by the flat-topped silhouettes of acacia trees. The air is clean and smells of dust, dry grass, and the distant promise of rain. There are no roads, no buildings, no sounds of engines. Only the wind, the buzz of insects, and the occasional call of an unfamiliar bird. But in that vastness, a figure appears. It's you. Not the you listening to this now, but an ancient version of you. Feel the warm, coarse dirt under your bare feet, calloused and strong. In your hand is a wooden spear, its weight a familiar comfort. Your skin is kissed by a sun you've known your entire life, and your muscles are not the product of a gym, but of a lifetime of walking, running, and carrying. You are lean, efficient, and profoundly aware. Your eyes, unburdened by screens, can spot the subtle twitch of an antelope's ear a kilometer away. Over hundreds of thousands of years, your kind, Homo sapiens, has become the apex predator of this world, a master of endurance and ingenuity. You are, in this moment, the pinnacle of human evolution. Now, fast forward. The world blurs. You see your descendants plant the first seeds, and the wild plains give way to orderly fields. You watch them build the first walls of the first cities, huddling together for safety. You see the smoke of the Industrial Revolution stain the sky, and you watch as your great-great-great-grandchildren trade their spears for tools, their tools for keyboards. You see the flickering candlelight of the ancient campfires transform into the cool blue glow of a screen. The very same kind of screen you might be looking at right now, or at least have nearby. The journey from that sun-drenched hunter to you, here, now, in the comfort of your room, has been a story of astonishing triumph. But has it? If that hunter was the blueprint, what are we? Are we a better, upgraded model, or have we lost something vital along the way? Frankly, your biggest concern back then wasn't a looming work deadline, but a looming saber-toothed cat. Slightly different stakes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. That small click sends a big signal to the algorithm. That long-form, serious educational content still matters. And to me, it's an incredibly meaningful show of support. Thank you so much for helping keep this channel going strong. It always fascinates me to see where you're all tuning in from. Let me know in the comments where you are in the world and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Feel the body you're in right now, the softness of the chair or bed supporting you, the comfortable temperature of the room, your eyes, which maybe feel a little tired from a day of focusing on things just a few feet or even a few inches away. Compare this physical reality to the one we just imagined. The body of that hunter on the savannah was an exquisite survival machine. For the vast majority of our species' existence, over 95% of it, in fact, we lived that way. Our entire biology, from the way our cells produce energy to the very structure of our bones, was forged in that Pleistocene crucible. We have the DNA of a wild animal, but we live in a zoo of our own making. This is the modern human paradox, and it's the heart of our story. We think of evolution as a straight line, a constant upward march of progress. But what if that's not true? What if, in our race to build a world of comfort and safety, we have inadvertently started to unravel the very things that made us so successful in the first place? Using the science of genetics, we can trace our maternal lineage all the way back through time, using the breadcrumb trail of mitochondrial DNA to a common ancestor who lived in Africa, a so-called mitochondrial Eve. She was a member of that hunter-gatherer world. She is the ghost in our machine. And tonight, we are going to explore a radical, unsettling idea. That in many ways, we are evolving backwards. We are becoming weaker, sicker, and more fragile than our ancient ancestors. This isn't a story about the distant past. It's a story about you, your body, and the invisible evolutionary forces that are shaping you every single day. To really get to the bottom of this idea, you have to first clear your mind of a very famous, very powerful, and very wrong image. You know the one. It's on t-shirts, posters, and in museum exhibits. It's the March of Progress, a single-file line starting with a stooped, ape-like creature, followed by a series of increasingly upright, less hairy figures, culminating in the proud, erect form of a modern human. The picture tells a simple, flattering story, that evolution is a journey with a destination, a ladder to be climbed, and that we, right now, are standing on the highest rung. But that image is a lie. It's a comforting piece of propaganda, we tell ourselves, but it has almost nothing to do with the messy, aimless, and beautiful reality of how life actually changes. Evolution is not a ladder. It's a vast, sprawling, and chaotically branching bush. Every twig, every leaf, is a unique form of life, and none is more evolved than any other. A jellyfish, perfectly suited to its watery world for 500 million years, is just as evolutionarily successful as you are. For a long time, our branch of that bush was crowded with other human-like twigs, the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, Homo erectus. They weren't failed attempts to become us. They were successful, alternative ways of being human. Branches that eventually withered for complex reasons we're still untangling. The fundamental process driving this branching is, of course, natural selection. It's the simple, brutal editor of life's script. Traits that help an organism survive and reproduce in its specific environment tend to get passed on. Traits that don't tend to vanish. But there's a crucial misunderstanding baked into the popular phrase, survival of the fittest. The word fittest doesn't mean strongest or fastest or smartest. It simply means the best fit. A key fits a lock. A polar bear, with its thick fur and layers of blubber, is perfectly fit for the Arctic, but would die in a week on the African savanna where our ancestors thrived. In that context, the polar bear is profoundly unfit. Fitness is always relative to the environment. And this brings us to the single most important concept for our entire journey tonight: evolutionary mismatch. Think of it this way. Imagine you take that perfectly adapted Arctic fox, a master of its snowy realm, and you teleport it into the middle of the Sahara Desert. The fox's brilliant white camouflage now makes it a glaring target. Its thick fur, a lifesaver in the cold, becomes a deadly heat trap. Its paws, designed for gripping ice, sink uselessly in the sand. Every single one of its exquisite adaptations has transformed from an asset into a fatal liability. The fox hasn't gotten worse. It hasn't de-evolved. It's just in the wrong place. Its biology is profoundly mismatched with its new reality. You, listening to this right now, are that Arctic fox in the desert. Your genes, your biology, the very blueprint of your body, was selected for and sculpted by a world that no longer exists. That world, which scientists sometimes call the environment of evolutionary adaptedness, or EEA, was a world of scarcity, constant physical movement, and immediate dangers. Now, while scholars still debate the precise timeline and conditions of the EEA, we know its broad strokes were those of a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Your body is built for that world, but you live in this one, a world of caloric abundance, sedentary comfort, and chronic, low-level stress. This mismatch is the root cause of so much of our modern suffering. And evolution isn't always a clean, elegant process of adaptation. Sometimes it's just random. There's a phenomenon called genetic drift, where traits can become more common in a population purely by chance, not because they're particularly useful. It's like reaching into a giant jar of mixed-color marbles and pulling out a handful. The colors in your hand might not represent the overall mix in the jar. It's just the luck of the draw. And sometimes, evolution just leaves things behind. Right now, try this. Put your arm on a flat surface, palm up. Touch your thumb to your pinky finger and raise your hand slightly at the wrist. Do you see a tendon pop up in the middle of your wrist? If so, you have a palmaris longus muscle. If not, you're one of the 10 to 15% of people born without it. This muscle is a vestigial leftover from our tree-climbing ancestors, and for modern humans it's completely useless. It's a ghost of a bygone world, still haunting our anatomy. Our bodies are full of these ghosts, these echoes of a time when our lives were wilder, harder, and in many ways, a much better fit for the bodies we still inhabit. So, let's bring one of those ghosts to life. Let's step back into the skin of that hunter you were 100,000 years ago and truly understand the magnificent biological machine you inhabited. Forget the brutish, club-wielding stereotype. The body you possessed was a marvel of athletic engineering, a masterpiece sculpted by the relentless pressures of the wild. And its signature skill, the one that set you apart from every other animal on the plains, was the ability to run. Not to sprint. A cheetah would leave you in the dust. You were built for something far more subtle and deadly. Endurance. You were a persistence hunter. Imagine the hunt begins. A kudu, a large antelope, breaks from its herd. It's faster than you, of course. It explodes in a burst of speed and is gone in seconds. But you don't give up. You begin a steady, loping trot. And here, the magic of your design reveals itself. With every stride, your long Achilles tendon, connecting your calf to your heel, stretches and recoils like a powerful spring, returning almost half the energy for your next step. Your neutral ligament, a unique feature in your neck that most other primates lack, keeps your head perfectly stable so you can keep your eyes locked on your prey without wobbling. And most importantly, as the midday sun beats down, your body does something your prey can't. You sweat. Millions of tiny glands across your skin release water, creating a film of personal air conditioning that cools your blood and allows your brain to stay safe. The kudu, meanwhile, is in trouble. To cool down, it has to pant, but it can't run at a full gallop and pant at the same time. It has to choose, so it sprints, then stops to pant, then sprints again. And you, in your steady, relentless trot, just keep closing the distance. After hours of this, the magnificent, powerful animal, its muscles overheating, simply gives up. It lies down in exhaustion, and you can approach. This superpower wasn't born of brute strength, but of superior thermodynamics. Contrast that with us now. We have bodies built for that marathon, but we use them to walk from the house to the car. Now, let's look deeper, beneath the skin. If an archaeologist were to find your femur 100 millennia from now, they would be astonished. The outer layer, the cortical bone, would be incredibly thick and dense. Your bones were built to withstand the immense and unpredictable stresses of a life lived on the move, leaping over rocks, climbing trees, occasionally fighting for your life. They were constantly being broken down and rebuilt in response to the strain, making them robust and resistant to fracture. Our bones, by comparison, coddled by a lifetime of chairs and smooth pavement, are often shockingly light and porous, like styrofoam next to their solid oak. And what about the world as you experienced it? Your senses were a high-fidelity stream of survival data. Your eyes, accustomed to scanning vast, open horizons, could detect the slightest flicker of movement, the subtle difference between a rock and a crouching lion. There was no blue light from screens to disrupt your sleep, no myopia epidemic from a childhood spent indoors. Your ears, in a world without engine hums and background noise, could pick up the snap of a twig 100 yards away and know what made it. You could smell a distant rainstorm on the wind, or the scent of a predator that had passed by hours ago. Your brain wasn't overloaded. It was perfectly tuned to filter the signal from the noise. Today, our senses are so bombarded, so overwhelmed by the sheer volume of artificial stimuli that we have, in many ways, gone numb. Finally, consider the engine that powered it all. Your metabolism. You had what we would now call profound metabolic flexibility. Life was a cycle of feast and famine. After a successful hunt, you would feast, and your body would be incredibly efficient at storing that energy. But during the inevitable lean times, your body wouldn't panic. It would seamlessly switch its fuel source, beginning to burn its own stored fat and producing molecules called ketones to power your brain and body. This state, ketosis, was a normal, recurring part of your life. It kept you sharp and energetic even when food was scarce. Today, fueled by a constant drip of sugary processed foods, most of us have lost this ability. Our bodies exist in a permanent feast mode, and the idea of missing a meal can trigger a physiological panic. You were a hybrid engine, able to run on any fuel. We have become diesel engines that sputter and die if we aren't constantly topped up. You were a survivor. We are just consumers. So if your body was this perfect wilderness machine, this ghost on the savannah, why did you ever give it up? Why did we trade the wide-open plains for the confines of a farmer's field? The answer is as seductive as it is tragic. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was a trap, one that was set and sprung so slowly over so many generations that no one ever saw it happening. The agricultural revolution wasn't an event. It was a slow, creeping process that began with a few simple, seemingly logical decisions. Perhaps it started with a tribe noticing that seeds discarded near their camp grew into useful plants. So they started tending to those plants, encouraging them, protecting them from pests. It was a bit more work, sure, but it offered something new and intoxicating, a small measure of predictability. This was the bait in the trap. Farming, even in its most primitive form, can produce vastly more calories per acre than foraging can. It's not necessarily better food, but it is more food. And more food allows a population to grow. The small, nomadic bands of a few dozen people could now swell into settled villages of hundreds. On the surface, this looked like success. We were beating back the uncertainty of the wild, creating a buffer against starvation. But as the historian Jared Diamond famously argued, this transition may have been the worst mistake in the history of the human race. We traded quality for quantity, and we paid for it with our health, our freedom, and our bodies. The first and most immediate price was paid by our diet. As a hunter-gatherer, you would have consumed a dizzyingly diverse menu over the course of a year. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of different species of plants, roots, berries, nuts, insects, and animals. Each provided a unique array of vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. The first farmers, by contrast, narrowed their entire existence down to a handful of staple crops. Suddenly, most of your calories came from wheat, or rice, or corn. This new diet was heavy in carbohydrates and woefully deficient in many of the micronutrients your body was accustomed to. Skeletons from the dawn of agriculture tell a grim story. Archaeologists can see the evidence of this nutritional collapse etched directly into the bones. They find Harris lines, thin, dark lines on femurs and tibias that mark periods where growth was stunted by severe malnutrition or disease. They see an explosion of dental caries or cavities as the starchy new diet fueled corrosive bacteria in the mouth. And most tellingly, they see that people got shorter. The average height of humans actually dropped significantly as we settled down to farm. Along with poor nutrition came a new and terrifying threat: the epidemic. For the first time, you began living in dense, permanent settlements, surrounded by your own waste, and you were now living in intimate proximity with your domesticated animals. Your pigs, your cattle, your goats, your chickens, they were a walking reservoir of pathogens, and those pathogens began to jump species. Zoonotic diseases that could never have gained a foothold in small, mobile hunter-gatherer groups now ripped through the new, crowded villages. Measles, tuberculosis, and smallpox are all horrifying gifts from our newly domesticated animal friends. We had created the perfect breeding ground for pestilence, and finally, this revolution transformed our very society. In a hunter-gatherer band, food was shared. There was little concept of accumulated wealth or property. But a field of grain is different. It can be owned. A surplus of grain can be stored, hoarded, and controlled. And the moment you have stored surplus, you have the birth of social hierarchy. You have the emergence of a ruling class that controls the food, and a laboring class that works the fields. You have taxes, kings, priests, and soldiers to protect the horde. You have, for the first time, organized warfare, as one village sought to steal the stored wealth of another. We didn't just put fences around our crops, we put fences around each other. We traded the egalitarian freedom of the band for the stratified security of the state. It was a gamble for our entire species, and in winning more food, we may have lost a piece of ourselves. That gamble we took 10,000 years ago had consequences that went far deeper than just our height or our teeth. It began a slow, invisible hollowing out of the human frame. To understand it, you need to know about a fundamental principle of your own body, a secret conversation that is happening within you at all times. It's called Wolff's Law, and it's beautifully simple. Your bone tissue will adapt to the loads it's placed under. Your skeleton is not a fixed, inert scaffold like the steel frame of a building. It's a living, dynamic tissue, more like a forest, constantly remodeling itself in response to the forces of its world. When you put stress on a bone, it sends a signal. I need to be stronger. When you don't, it sends another signal. I'm not needed. Time to conserve resources and lighten the load. Let's imagine the life of your hunter-gatherer femur, that ghost on the savannah. From the moment you learned to walk, it was subjected to a rich and varied symphony of stress. The thousands of steps you took each day over uneven, unpredictable terrain sent a constant percussive vibration up its shaft. A sudden sprint after prey, a leap across a stream, the heavy load of a successful kill carried back to camp. Each of these events was a message, telling the bone to reinforce itself. In response to this conversation, a cellular construction crew got to work. Specialized cells called osteoblasts were dispatched to lay down new layers of dense, mineralized tissue, making the bone thick and resilient. They were always busy, always reinforcing, because the demands of your life never ceased. Now, let's imagine the life of a modern femur, perhaps even your own. Its world is quiet. The ground it walks on is flat, predictable asphalt. The sprints and leaps have been replaced by the gentle push of a gas pedal. The heavy loads have been replaced by shopping carts and desk chairs. For hours and hours every day, it sits quietly, bearing no load at all, bathed in the deep, unnatural stillness of a sedentary life. The conversation has gone silent. The urgent messages to get stronger have ceased. And so, the skeleton, in its ruthless efficiency, makes a logical decision. It begins to downsize. The construction crew, the osteoblasts, are told to take a break. But the demolition crew, the osteoclasts, cells whose job is to break down and reabsorb bone tissue, keep working. The delicate balance is broken. Slowly, silently, decade by decade, the bone is hollowed out from the inside. This process isn't some rare affliction. It has a name, and you've heard it before: osteoporosis. We talk about it as if it's a disease that mysteriously strikes us in old age. But it's not. It is the predictable, cumulative result of a lifetime spent ignoring Wolff's Law. It is a disease of evolutionary mismatch, born from the profound discrepancy between the wild, physically demanding world our skeletons were built for and the comfortable cushioned cage we have built for them. If you want a truly dramatic, high-speed example of this process, just look to the stars. When astronauts go into space, they enter an environment of zero gravity. This is the ultimate sedentary lifestyle, a world with no physical load whatsoever. The results are astonishing and immediate. An astronaut can lose between 1% and 2% of their bone mass for every month they are in orbit. Their bodies, receiving no signal that strong bones are needed to fight gravity, begin to jettison that metabolically expensive tissue with shocking speed. They are, in essence, speed-running the same process of skeletal decay that we are undertaking down here on Earth, just in slow motion. We traded the savannah for the sofa, and our bones are quietly, invisibly paying the price. This hollowing out of our bones was accompanied by a more obvious change, one you could see with the naked eye. We began to shrink. If you subscribe to the march of progress idea, you'd assume that humans have been on a steady, linear journey towards becoming taller and more robust. But the skeleton tells a very different story. It's not a steady climb, it's a wild roller coaster ride. For hundreds of thousands of years as hunter-gatherers, your ancestors were relatively tall and imposing figures. But the moment we chained ourselves to the farm, the roller coaster took a sharp, stomach-lurching plunge. When archaeologists compare the skeletons of the last hunter-gatherers with those of the first farmers who lived right alongside them or replaced them, the difference is stark. In southeastern Europe, around 10,000 years ago, the average height for men plummeted from a respectable 5'10" to a mere 5'3". That's a loss of 7 inches. women saw a similar drop. This wasn't a localized blip. This pattern repeats itself all over the world, wherever agriculture took hold. The new diet of starchy grains, lacking in protein and essential nutrients, simply couldn't build the same kind of frame as the rich, varied diet of the wild. We were a species in decline, stunted by our own supposed ingenuity. Interpreting these ancient bones, however, can be tricky, and it reveals a fascinating scientific puzzle known as the osteological paradox. Imagine you discover two ancient cemeteries. In the first, the skeletons are riddled with signs of healed infections, porous bone from anemia, and lines of arrested growth. In the second cemetery, the skeletons look much cleaner, much healthier. Your first instinct would be to say the second group had a better life. But the paradox is that the opposite is often true. The skeletons marked by struggle belonged to people who were robust enough to survive their illnesses and famines. Their bones are a medical chart, recording a life of hardship that they were strong enough to endure. The clean skeletons, on the other hand, may have belonged to a much frailer population, one that simply died at the first sign of trouble, leaving behind no bony record of their suffering. It's a sobering reminder that sometimes the evidence of health is the evidence of a life hard fought. For thousands of years, we remained in this shorter, more fragile state. But in the last 150 years or so, the roller coaster has shot upwards again, reaching unprecedented heights. Thanks to modern sanitation, a reduction in childhood disease, and an overwhelming abundance of calories, we are now taller than we have ever been. This seems like an undeniable victory, a clear sign that we've finally overcome the nutritional deficiencies of the past. But is it really that simple? Is this towering new height a genuine sign of robust health, or is it something else, a kind of artificial inflation? Think of it like growing a plant in a greenhouse with unlimited fertilizer and artificial lights. The plant will certainly grow bigger and faster than its wild counterpart, but is it healthier? Is it more resilient? Our modern diet, filled with an endless supply of calories, milk, and growth-promoting proteins, may be doing something similar to our bodies. It's pushing our genetic potential for height to its absolute maximum, but it might be a hollow victory. And this leads to a very modern and unsettling question, as scholars and epidemiologists still debate whether this dramatic increase in height is an unmitigated good. There appears to be a trade-off. The same biological pathways that encourage rapid growth in our youth, particularly a hormone called insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1, are also implicated in the uncontrolled growth of cells later in life. Multiple studies have shown that taller individuals have a statistically higher risk of developing certain cancers. The very thing we celebrate as a sign of progress might be a Faustian bargain, trading a few extra inches of stature for a hidden vulnerability written deep in our cells. The changes to our skeleton weren't just confined to our height and the hidden density of our bones. They reached all the way up into our faces, reshaping the very structure of who we are. And it all begins with the jaw. This is a change that is, in many ways, far more consequential to your daily health than a few inches of stature, because it affects how you eat, how you breathe, and even how you sleep. To understand it, we need to revisit our old friend, Wolff's Law. Just as your femur gets stronger with the stress of walking and running, your jaw bones get stronger and grow larger in response to the stress of chewing. Scientists call this masticatory stress. Let's go back to that hunter on the savannah one last time and think about what mealtime was like. The food you ate was tough, incredibly tough. It was fibrous, gritty, and often uncooked. You would spend a significant portion of your day just chewing, grinding down tough plant tubers, tearing at sinewy meat. Your jaw muscles, the masseters and temporalis, were powerful engines, and your jawbones, the maxilla and mandible, were constantly receiving a powerful message. Grow. Be strong. Be wide. We have serious work to do. Your jaws were, in essence, in the gym for hours every single day. Now, consider a typical modern day of eating. Maybe you start with a smoothie or a bowl of cereal. For lunch, a soft bread sandwich. For dinner, some pasta or rice. The amount of actual, forceful chewing you have to do is almost zero. Our food is soft, pre-cut, and processed to be as effortless as possible. Our powerful jaw muscles are, for the most part, unemployed. The conversation between muscle and bone has dwindled to a whisper. The jawbone, receiving no signal that it needs to be big and strong, simply doesn't develop to its full genetic potential. This great softening didn't happen overnight. The first major step in this journey was one of humanity's greatest triumphs, the harnessing of fire. Cooking our food was a revolutionary act. It unlocked nutrients, killed pathogens, and made indigestible foods edible. It was, in effect, the first act of outsourcing our digestion. By breaking down tough cell walls and proteins with heat before the food ever entered our mouths, we drastically reduced the amount of chewing required to get the job done. This was a huge advantage, likely freeing up calories that helped fuel our growing brains. But it was also the beginning of the end for our powerful, robust jaws. For centuries, this was just a background process. But in the early 20th century, a crusading dentist from Cleveland named Weston A. Price noticed something alarming. In his practice, he was seeing more and more patients with crooked, crowded teeth and dental decay. He became convinced it was linked to our modern diet. So, he embarked on an incredible journey, traveling the world to study the teeth of isolated populations who were still untouched by modern industrial food. From the Inuit in the Arctic to tribes in the heart of Africa, he found the same thing everywhere he went. People living on their traditional, tough, nutrient-dense diets had broad, beautiful jaws with perfectly straight, cavity-free teeth. But as soon as these same groups began to incorporate modern foods, white flour, sugar, canned goods, their dental health would collapse, often within a single generation. His photographs from the 1930s are a shocking testament to this change, showing siblings where the one raised on a traditional diet has a wide, strong face, and the one raised on modern food has a narrow face with crowded teeth. What Dr. Price observed has since been confirmed in controlled laboratory settings. In numerous scientific studies on animals, if you take two genetically similar siblings, say a pair of mini pigs, and you feed one a diet of tough, natural foods and the other a diet of soft, processed pellets, the results are dramatic and predictable. The pig on the soft diet will develop a smaller, weaker jaw, a narrower palate, and crowded, crooked teeth. The hard diet pig will develop the broad, strong jaw of its ancestors. The evidence is overwhelming. We didn't just change what we eat, we changed our faces. This shrinking of our faces, this slow retreat of the human jaw, created a simple architectural problem with profound consequences. Think of it as a mismatch in blueprints. Your genes, carrying the ancient memory of your ancestors, still hold the blueprint for a full set of 32 large, strong teeth. This genetic code is stubborn. It hasn't changed much in the last 100,000 years. Your jaw, however, is a much more adaptable structure. Its final size and shape are determined by the environmental signals it receives as you grow, primarily the forces of chewing we just discussed. So you have ancient genes specifying a large set of teeth, but a modern environment that builds a much smaller jaw to house them. It's like trying to fit a 32-piece dining set into a cabinet built for 28. Things are going to get crowded. This crowding is the root cause of a condition so common today we think of it as normal. Malocclusion, the technical term for crooked and misaligned teeth. Go back and look at the skulls of your pre-agricultural ancestors, and you will find broad, U-shaped dental arches with every tooth in perfect alignment, straight as a picket fence. Now, look around at any modern classroom or office. You will see a gallery of overbites, underbites, and crowded, overlapping teeth. Malocclusion is not a fundamental flaw in human biology. It is a disease of civilization, a direct symptom of our soft, processed diet. Our jaws are simply not growing big enough to accommodate the teeth we are genetically programmed to have. And where there is a widespread problem, a lucrative industry will rise to solve it. The entire field of orthodontics is, in essence, a brilliant and sophisticated technological solution to this evolutionary mismatch. The wires, the brackets, the retainers, they are all external tools we use to manually force our teeth into the orderly alignment that our ancestors achieved naturally, just by eating their tough, traditional food. We are spending billions of dollars and years of discomfort to correct a problem that, for 99% of human history, simply did not exist. We are artificially creating the dental arches that our modern lifestyle has denied us. Nowhere is this problem more obvious or more famous than in the story of our third molars, better known by their fateful nickname, the wisdom teeth. We think of them as a kind of evolutionary mistake, a useless, troublemaking appendage that needs to be surgically removed. But for our ancestors, they weren't a mistake at all. They were just teeth. They were the final backup set of grinders, scheduled to erupt in the late teens, often conveniently arriving just as other molars were becoming worn down by a lifetime of chewing gritty, tough food. In their large, spacious jaws, there was plenty of room. The wisdom teeth came in, took their place at the back of the line, and got to work. But in your shrunken modern jaw, the story is tragically different. The wisdom tooth is the last guest to arrive at a dinner party where all the chairs have already been taken. There is simply no room at the back of your mouth. And so, this perfectly good tooth becomes impacted. It gets stuck, growing in sideways, crashing into the roots of its neighbors, creating pockets for infection and causing pain. The tooth isn't the problem. The jaw is. The fact that the prevalence of impacted wisdom teeth is a hallmark of industrialized populations, while being almost completely absent in ancient hunter-gatherer skulls, is one of the most powerful pieces of evidence we have. It proves that the problem isn't a faulty part, but a faulty environment. We've created a mouthful of trouble, a daily personal reminder of the mismatch between our ancient genes and our modern life. The consequences of this shrinking facial architecture go far beyond the cosmetic inconvenience of a crooked smile. The trouble in your mouth is just the visible symptom of a much deeper, more insidious problem. Because the size and position of your jaw don't just determine how your teeth fit. They determine the very shape and size of the airway behind them. And when that airway is compromised, it disrupts the most fundamental and vital biological process of all, the act of breathing. Think of your airway, specifically the part at the back of your throat called the pharynx, as a soft, flexible tube. The front wall of this tube is formed by the back of your tongue. The position of your lower jaw, your mandible, is what anchors your tongue and holds it forward, keeping that tube wide open. But as our jaws have gotten smaller over the generations, they have also tended to grow downwards and backwards, becoming recessed. This pushes the tongue back with them, forcing it to occupy the space that rightfully belongs to your airway. The tube gets narrower. It's like a garden hose that's being gently, permanently kinked. During the day, while you're awake, the muscles in your throat are tense and active, holding this narrowed passage open enough for you to get by. But the moment you fall asleep, everything changes. Your muscles relax, and in a person with a compromised airway, that relaxation is enough for the hose to collapse completely. The back of the tongue slumps backwards and seals the passage. For 10, 20, sometimes even 60 seconds, you stop breathing entirely. This is obstructive sleep apnea. Your brain, starved of oxygen, sounds the alarm. It sends a jolt of adrenaline and cortisol through your system, a primal panic signal to shock you partially awake. Your throat muscles tense. You take a desperate gasp or snort. The airway reopens, and you start breathing again. A few moments later, you slip back into a deeper sleep. Your muscles relax, and the entire cycle of suffocation and panicked awakening begins anew. This can happen dozens or even hundreds of times a night, and you will likely have no memory of it in the morning. All you'll know is that you feel exhausted, foggy, and never truly rested. It's not just snoring. It's a nightly battle for air, placing immense stress on your cardiovascular system, leading to high blood pressure and heart disease, and starving your brain of the oxygen and restorative sleep it needs for long-term cognitive health. This is a full-blown modern epidemic, and it is a direct consequence of our shrinking jaws. Compounding the problem is the related habit of mouth breathing. The same developmental forces that narrow our jaws also often lead to narrowed nasal passages. When you can't get enough air through your nose, your body defaults to the backup system, your mouth. But your nose is a highly specialized piece of equipment designed to filter, warm, and humidify the air you breathe. Breathing through your mouth bypasses this entire system, delivering cold, dry, unfiltered air directly to your lungs, and has been linked to a host of health issues. It is a profound and tragic irony. In our relentless quest for comfort, we invented technologies like cooking and food processing to make eating effortless. We created a world of soft, easy foods to save our jaws the trouble of working. And in doing so, we have created a silent epidemic of suffocation, remodeling our own faces in such a way that for millions of us, the simple, unconscious act of taking a breath during sleep has become a life-threatening struggle. We traded the hard work of chewing for the terrifying work of fighting for air. The architectural changes in our bodies, born from our shifting lifestyles, extend all the way down to our very foundation. The story of the human skeleton is not just one of shrinking jaws and hollowing bones. It's also the story of a fundamental conflict, an engineering puzzle that evolution has struggled to solve, and one that comes to a head in the most critical and vulnerable moment of life, the moment of birth. This puzzle is known as the obstetrical dilemma, and it represents one of the most profound trade-offs in our entire evolutionary history. The dilemma was created by two of our most defining characteristics pulling us in opposite directions. First, we decided to walk on two legs. This transition to bipedalism was a masterstroke, freeing our hands to create tools and carry resources. But it required a radical redesign of our pelvis. It had to become narrower, more robust, and more bowl-like to provide the stability needed to balance on 2 feet, and to hold our internal organs up against the constant pull of gravity. At the same time, another evolutionary trend was in full swing, the relentless expansion of our brains. For millions of years, our skulls grew larger and larger to house our increasingly complex minds. These two evolutionary currents were on a collision course. We needed a narrow pelvis to walk, but we needed a large skull for our intelligence. The result is that a human baby's head is, on average, almost exactly the same size as the birth canal it must pass through. There is no room for error. Compared to the relatively easy births of our primate cousins like chimpanzees, human childbirth is uniquely long, arduous, and inherently dangerous. It's a design compromise of the highest order, a tightrope walk between our two greatest evolutionary achievements. And in our modern world, we may have made this ancient tightrope walk even more precarious. Think again of the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Your ancestors would have spent their days in constant, varied motion. They would have rested not in chairs, but in a deep squat, a position that naturally opens the pelvic outlet and maintains flexibility in the hips. A lifetime of walking, squatting, and moving kept the crucial muscles and joints of the pelvis strong and pliable. A modern, sedentary lifestyle, by contrast, can lead to tighter muscles and a less flexible pelvic structure. A lifetime spent in chairs can make an already difficult passage even more challenging. The very comfort of our modern lives can add friction to this most fundamental of biological processes. But is this purely a mechanical problem? Recently, scholars are now debating whether the classic obstetrical dilemma is the full story. A newer, complementary theory suggests the timing of birth may be dictated less by the baby's head size and more by simple energy. A human pregnancy is an incredible metabolic marathon. By the 9-month mark, a fetus's demand for calories becomes so great that the mother's metabolism simply cannot keep up. We may not give birth because the baby's head has reached its maximum possible size for passage, but because the mother has reached her maximum capacity to fuel it from the inside. We are born, in a sense, on the verge of a metabolic crisis. Yet out of this profound biological difficulty comes something beautiful and uniquely human. Unlike virtually all other primates, a human baby has to perform a complex series of twists and turns to navigate the birth canal. This means it is born facing backwards, away from the mother. A chimpanzee mother can simply reach down and guide her own baby out into the world. A human mother cannot. She cannot clear the baby's airway or untangle the cord. She is helpless. This simple anatomical fact made social assistance a near absolute necessity for a successful birth. From the very beginning, we needed midwives, sisters, mothers, and tribe members to help us. Our perilous journey into the world may have been one of the most powerful evolutionary forces that selected for empathy, for cooperation, and for deep social bonds. It's another stunning paradox. The trouble with being born may be precisely what started to make us human. We've spent this journey exploring the ways our skeleton has been reshaped, our bodies hollowed out and shrunk by the strange new world we built for ourselves. But through all of this, you might be holding on to one comforting thought. Surely our greatest asset, the organ that orchestrates our entire existence, has been immune to this trend. Surely the human brain has only continued its magnificent upward trajectory of growth and complexification. It is, after all, the one thing that truly sets us apart. But the story written in our skulls is perhaps the most shocking and counterintuitive of all. Because our brains are shrinking. For millions of years, the defining story of our lineage was one of relentless brain growth. From the small-brained Australopithecus on the ancient African plains, through the globe-trotting Homo erectus with its expanding toolkit, to the Neanderthals and our own early Homo sapiens ancestors, the trend was unwavering. Skulls got bigger, foreheads got higher, and cognitive capacity exploded. This process, known as encephalization, was the central theme of human evolution. It was the arms race that we were consistently winning. Our big brains allowed us to create complex tools, to master fire, to develop language, and to build the social structures that allowed us to conquer the planet. The brain was our superpower, and for eons, the rule was simple: bigger is better. And then something strange happened. Sometime around the end of the last ice age, perhaps 20,000 years ago, this unstoppable multi-million-year trend of brain growth came to a screeching halt. And then, it went into reverse. The skulls of our recent ancestors, like the Cro-Magnon people who painted the stunning caves of Lascaux in France, housed brains that were, on average, significantly larger than ours are today. Their cranial capacity was around 1,500 cubic centimeters. The average human brain today is closer to 350 cubic centimeters. We have lost, over the last 20 millennia, a volume of gray matter roughly the size of a tennis ball. Let that sink in for a moment. The people who invented the internet, who composed symphonies, who split the atom and walked on the moon, have done so with a brain that is physically smaller than the one possessed by their ancestors who were chipping away at flint spearheads. This is a profound and deeply unsettling paradox. We pride ourselves on being the smartest, most cognitively sophisticated species to ever exist, the absolute pinnacle of intelligence on this planet. Yet the very organ responsible for that intelligence, our crowning glory, has been shrinking for thousands of years. This fact presents us with one of the most fascinating mysteries in human evolution. It's a puzzle that scientists are still trying to piece together. What happened? What selective pressure, what change in our environment or our society suddenly made a leaner, smaller brain more advantageous than a larger one? Was this a downgrade, a sign of cognitive decline that has been masked by the accumulated knowledge of civilization? Or is it possible that this shrinkage represents a kind of streamlining, a rewiring for greater efficiency, rather than a loss of raw power? It's the central question in the story of our modern mind. Why did our brains start shrinking, and what exactly does it mean for us? So how do we solve this mystery? How do we account for the missing tennis ball of gray matter? Scientists have put forward several compelling and sometimes competing explanations. None of them may be the whole story, but each gives us a fascinating glimpse into the forces that may have reshaped our minds. The first and most fundamental place to look is at the sheer cost of running a brain. Your brain is, by a huge margin, the most metabolically expensive organ you own. It makes up only about 2% of your body's weight, but it greedily consumes a full 20% of your daily calories. It is a true energy hog. For a long time, this fact was used to explain how our brains got so big in the first place. This is the expensive tissue hypothesis. The idea is that as we learned to cook and hunt, we gained access to higher quality, more easily digestible food. This meant our other expensive organ, our digestive tract, could shrink. A smaller gut freed up a huge amount of metabolic energy that could then be rerouted upstairs to fuel a growing brain. But this logic is a two-way street. If a change in energy availability can fuel brain growth, then perhaps another change could favor brain shrinkage. A smaller, slightly less powerful brain is a significantly cheaper brain to run. A 10% reduction in brain size could translate into a meaningful daily energy saving, which, in a world of periodic famine or increased population pressure, might have been a crucial survival advantage. The pressure to be smart might have been outweighed by the even more ancient pressure to simply not starve. A second, more provocative idea is that we became tamer. This is the self-domestication hypothesis. Think about the difference between a wild wolf and a golden retriever. The dog is a domesticated version of the wolf, and in the process of becoming our best friend, its brain has shrunk by about 20 to 30%. This pattern holds true for nearly all domesticated animals when compared to their wild ancestors. Pigs, sheep, cattle, you name it. Domestication seems to universally select for a suite of traits: less aggression, more social tolerance, and a smaller brain. Now, apply that logic to us. For the vast majority of our history, we lived in small, mobile groups. But after the agricultural revolution, we began living in massive, settled societies with thousands of our fellow humans. In this new, crowded environment, the ideal personality traits for survival and reproduction likely shifted. Fierce, aggressive independence, which may have been an asset in a small band, could get you killed in a village. The individuals who thrived were likely those who were better at cooperating, at diffusing conflict, and at tolerating living cheek by jowl with strangers. Did we, in essence, domesticate ourselves? Did we subconsciously select for more docile, less aggressive mates, and in doing so, inadvertently select for the genetic package that came along with those traits, including a slightly smaller brain? It's a compelling idea. We may have traded a little bit of our wild ancestral brain power for the ability to all get along. But there is a third, more optimistic possibility. What if a smaller brain isn't a weaker brain? What if it's a more efficient one? Think of the history of computing. The first electronic computer, ENIAC, filled an entire room, weighed 30 tons, and consumed enormous amounts of power. Your smartphone is thousands of times more powerful, fits in your pocket, and runs on a tiny battery. The progress wasn't in making it bigger, but in making the components smaller, faster, and more cleverly wired together. Perhaps our brains underwent a similar upgrade. Maybe, after reaching a peak size, evolution began to favor not more raw hardware, but better software. Genetic changes could have led to a more efficient wiring diagram, a faster processing speed, or a pruning of redundant neural pathways. In this view, losing a tennis ball's worth of brain wasn't a downgrade, it was an optimization. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for that third idea, the theory of a smaller but more efficient brain, isn't found in what we lost, but in how the remaining brain was reshaped. While our skulls were getting smaller overall, they were also undergoing a dramatic change in their geometry. The story of our modern mind isn't just about downsizing, it's about a profound and critical reorganization. If you were to look at the skull of one of your earlier ancestors, like a Neanderthal or an early Homo sapiens from 300,000 years ago, you'd notice it was long and low. It had a prominent brow ridge and a shape that was almost like a football. Their brains were elongated to fit. Your skull, by contrast, is distinctly different. It's high, domed, and rounded, much more like a soccer ball. This unique shape is called globularity, and it is a defining feature of modern humans. This process of rounding out our heads is a relatively recent event in our evolution, happening between 100,000 and 35,000 years ago, long after our species first appeared, but just before a mysterious explosion in our creativity. This change in shape wasn't random. It was driven by the specific expansion of certain brain regions, which bulged outwards and pushed the whole structure into its modern, rounded form. Two areas, in particular, seem to have been the stars of this evolutionary makeover. The first are the parietal lobes, located on the top and sides of your head. Think of these as your brain's master integrators. They take the raw data from your eyes, your ears, and your sense of touch and weave it all together into a seamless, coherent, three-dimensional model of the world around you. They are crucial for spatial awareness, for navigating your environment, and for the kind of complex hand-eye coordination needed to create sophisticated tools. The second area is one that, until recently, was often overlooked: the cerebellum. Tucked away at the back and base of your brain, its name literally means little brain. For a long time, scientists thought its primary job was simply balance and fine motor control. But we now know it is a powerhouse, deeply involved in many of the things we consider most human. It plays a critical role in memory, in attention, in social cognition, and in the complex sequential thinking required for both tool-making and language. So, our brains got a bit smaller, but our parietal lobes and cerebellum got bigger and more prominent. What was the result of this renovation? Well, the timing is suggestive. This globularization of the brain coincides almost perfectly with the period archaeologists call the Great Leap Forward, or the Upper Paleolithic Revolution. This is the moment in the human story, around 40,000 years ago, when the lights suddenly seem to turn on. All at once we see the worldwide appearance of things we had never seen before. Stunning and symbolic cave art, carved figurines, musical instruments like bone flutes, elaborate burials that suggest a belief in an afterlife, and a new toolkit of finely crafted, specialized implements. This wasn't just a cultural update. It was a cognitive revolution. It was the birth of the symbolic mind. The moment we started to fill the world with meaning beyond its surface appearance. And it seems to have been driven by the reorganization of our brains. This presents us with a powerful counter-narrative to the idea of a simple decline. The story of the brain may not be one of evolving backwards at all. It may be a story of a crucial trade-off. We may have sacrificed the raw, brute force processing power of a larger brain for a more nimble, more interconnected, and ultimately more creative mind. The shrinking was not the main event. It was a side effect of the rewiring. We got a smaller, rounder, and perhaps a much more beautiful mind. The story of our reorganized globular brain seems to suggest a wonderful trade-off. We lost size, but gained a new kind of creative and symbolic intelligence. And for most of the last century, it looked like we had the data to prove that our minds were, indeed, getting sharper. This brings us to a fascinating and now controversial phenomenon known as the Flynn effect. Discovered by the late philosopher and intelligence researcher James Flynn, it was a remarkable pattern he found when looking at IQ test scores from all over the world. The pattern was this: for the entire 20th century, humanity seemed to be getting smarter. Generation after generation, in dozens of countries, the average score on standardized intelligence tests rose steadily and significantly. An individual who scored an average of 100 on an IQ test in the 1980s would have scored around 115 on a test standardized in the 1950s. And that person from the 1950s would have scored around 130, firmly in the gifted category by the standards of the 1920s. On average, we were gaining about 3 IQ points per decade. This wasn't a slow, genetic evolution. It was happening far too fast. The cause had to be our environment. Researchers pointed to a few key factors. First, better nutrition. Healthier, better-fed children simply grow healthier brains. Second, more and better schooling. We were spending more years in classrooms, being trained in the kind of abstract, scientific, and logical thinking that IQ tests are designed to measure. And third, perhaps most importantly, we were living in a more mentally stimulating world. Our environment was becoming saturated with abstract symbols, complex machinery, and visual information that demanded new ways of thinking. We were, in essence, putting our brains through a constant, low-level workout that our agrarian ancestors never experienced. The Flynn effect was a comforting story. It was the march of progress chart, finally made real. It told us that even if our brains weren't getting bigger, they were certainly getting better. But then, around the turn of the 21st century, the story changed. Researchers, particularly in the highly documented nations of Scandinavia, began to notice something unsettling. The steady, decades-long rise in IQ scores had stalled. Then, in several countries, including Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Great Britain, it started to tick downwards. The roller coaster, after a century of climbing, had crested the hill and was beginning a gentle but undeniable descent. This is the reverse Flynn effect, and it presents us with a deeply uncomfortable question. Are we getting dumber? The scientific community is now grappling with this mystery, and there is no easy answer. One possibility is simply that the big gains have already been made. We've picked the low-hanging fruit of improved nutrition and universal education. The massive upward trend had to plateau eventually, but that doesn't fully explain the decline. This is where the scholarly debate truly ignites. One major argument is that our definition of intelligence and the tools we use to measure it are becoming obsolete. Scholars debate whether IQ tests, which heavily favor a certain kind of abstract logical reasoning, are still capturing the skills that matter most in the 21st century. Perhaps our intelligence is not declining, but shifting its focus to other areas, like social intelligence or creative problem-solving, that these old tests simply don't measure. Or perhaps there are more troubling forces at play. Some researchers point to changes in our educational systems, with a potential shift away from rigorous reading and critical thinking. Others look to the massive change in our information diet. Has the fire hose of shallow, bite-sized digital media weakened our capacity for deep focus and complex thought? Still others are investigating the potential neurological impact of environmental toxins or changes in diet. The truth is, we don't know for sure, but the data is clear. The great upward climb of 20th century intelligence is over. We are now adrift in uncharted cognitive territory. One of the prime suspects in that modern mystery of our declining IQ scores is the very environment you're likely immersed in right now, the digital world. The question is no longer just about the physical size and shape of our brains, but about how the software is being rewritten in real time by our technology. To understand this, you need to appreciate one of the brain's most remarkable features, its neuroplasticity. Your brain is not a fixed, static organ. It is a dynamic, living network that is constantly rewiring itself in response to your experiences, your thoughts, and your habits. Think of your neural pathways as trails through a dense forest. When you learn a new skill or think a certain thought, you are forging a new trail. The more you use that trail, the wider, clearer, and more efficient it becomes. The trails you neglect, however, slowly become overgrown and disappear. Every moment of your life, you are acting as the landscape architect of your own mind. This plasticity is what allows you to learn and adapt, but it also means that your brain is exquisitely vulnerable to the environment it's steeped in. And we have steeped ourselves in an environment unlike any that has ever existed. Consider the act of remembering. For all of human history, your memory was a vital, internal resource. Bards memorized epic poems, scholars held entire libraries in their heads, and your ancestors remembered the complex branching pathways of their territory. Today, we have outsourced that faculty. This is the Google effect, or digital amnesia. Our brains, in their relentless pursuit of efficiency, have learned a new fundamental rule. There is no need to expend energy committing information to long-term memory if you know you can look it up instantly. We are no longer incentivized to remember the what, only the where. Ask yourself, how many phone numbers do you know by heart right now, compared to before you had a smartphone? We have offloaded our memory onto an external silicon hard drive, and the neural pathways for deep, internal recall are perhaps beginning to grow over, but the impact goes far beyond just memory. It affects the very quality of our attention. The digital world is an ecosystem of interruption. Our phones and computers subject us to a constant barrage of notifications, pings, dings, and vibrations, each one a tiny, irresistible bid for our focus. This environment trains our brains to exist in a state of perpetual, partial attention, constantly scanning the horizon for the next little hit of novel information. We are becoming masters of shifting our focus rapidly from one shallow thing to another. The cost of this constant distraction is the loss of our ability to engage in what the author Cal Newport calls deep work. This is the state of intense, single-minded concentration that is required to learn a difficult skill, to solve a complex problem, or to create something of genuine value. Deep work requires long, uninterrupted stretches of focus, allowing your brain to fire up the necessary neural circuits and follow a single train of thought to its conclusion. But the trail to that state of deep focus is, for many of us, becoming overgrown and hard to find. The constant demand to multitask is a myth. What we are actually doing is switching tasks rapidly, and each switch incurs a cognitive cost, leaving us mentally fatigued and preventing us from ever sinking into a state of true, productive depth. This leads us to the great trade-off of our information age. We have gained something miraculous: instant access to the sum total of human knowledge. But what have we lost in the bargain? Are we, as some have suggested, trading the capacity for deep, internalized wisdom for the convenience of shallow, immediate access? We are becoming informational jacks of all trades, but masters of none. We may have the world's greatest library at our fingertips, but we may be losing the ability to sit quietly in a corner and actually read one of its books. We've spent the last few parts of our journey exploring the invisible world inside your head, looking at the ways your very thoughts and mind have been reshaped. Now, we're going to shift our focus to another invisible world, one just as complex and just as profoundly affected by our modern lives, the microscopic ecosystem that your body inhabits, and the ancient defense force that patrols its borders. I'm talking about your immune system. And to understand its story, you have to understand a paradox known as the hygiene hypothesis. It's the unsettling idea that our greatest victories over disease may have inadvertently created a whole new class of chronic illnesses. To grasp this, you first need to picture the world your immune system was designed for. Step back into that ancestral environment. The world you inhabited was, by modern standards, incredibly dirty. You drank unfiltered water from streams. You ate plants pulled straight from the soil and animals you had just butchered. You were in constant, intimate contact with the dirt, the mud, the animals, and the other people in your tribe. Your body was not a sterile sanctuary. It was a bustling ecosystem, a shared habitat for a vast menagerie of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and crucially, parasites like intestinal worms. Your immune system didn't evolve to live in a clean room. It co-evolved over millions of years as an active participant in this messy, microscopic world. From the moment you were born, it was constantly being stimulated, challenged, and, most importantly, trained. It was constantly sampling the environment, learning to distinguish between a deadly pathogen, a harmless microbe just passing through, a beneficial gut bacterium, and the cells of your own body. This constant low-level engagement with what scientists call our old friends was essential for its proper calibration. It was a school for your defenses, and the curriculum was written in dirt. Now, contrast that with the world we've built. We drink chlorinated water from sanitized pipes. We live in hermetically sealed homes, scrubbing our surfaces with antibacterial wipes. Our food is pasteurized, irradiated, and washed. And most powerfully of all, at the first sign of a serious infection, we deploy the nuclear option, antibiotics, which wipe out vast swaths of our internal ecosystem. We have, through our ingenuity, created a world of profound microbial peace and quiet. We have vanquished many of the ancient enemies that plagued our ancestors. But in doing so, we have deprived our developing immune systems of their education. And this is where the central analogy of the hygiene hypothesis comes in. Think of your immune system as a vast, powerful, and highly aggressive army. For millennia, it was trained and conditioned for a constant low-grade guerrilla war. It was always on alert, always engaged, always fighting off small incursions. But now, you have raised that same army in a time of unprecedented peace. The old enemies are gone. The borders are quiet. The army is garrisoned with nothing to do. It is an army without a war. And a bored, restless army is a dangerous thing. With no external enemy to fight, its soldiers become jumpy and trigger-happy. They start to lose their discipline. They lose the ability to distinguish friend from foe. This powerful force, designed to protect you, starts looking for trouble. It begins to overreact to harmless things it encounters in the environment, like pollen or dust. And in the most serious cases, it turns its weapons inward, looking at the very cells and tissues it's supposed to defend, and mistaking them for a hostile invader. This is the tragic, unintended consequence of our clean new world. We won the war against filth, and in the eerie silence that followed, our inner army began a civil war. The first casualties in this new internal war are not caused by your immune system attacking your own body, but by it tragically misidentifying harmless civilians as enemy spies. This is the root of the allergy explosion, a uniquely modern plague. Think of the conditions that were incredibly rare a century ago, but are now staples of childhood. Hay fever, eczema, asthma, and life-threatening food allergies. We tend to see these as separate, unlucky afflictions. But they are not. They are all just different battles in the same war, different symptoms of a single, underlying dysfunction. A bored, jumpy, and profoundly confused immune army. To understand why this happens, we need to look a little closer at the structure of that army. Your immune system has many different branches and divisions, but for our story, you can think of it as having two main departments, which need to be kept in balance like a seesaw. Let's call the first one the TH1 division. This is your heavy infantry, your bacterial and viral warfare unit. Its job is to fight off actual infections that get inside your cells, like bacteria and viruses. This is the part of your immune system that was meant to be constantly trained and stimulated by the dirt, microbes, and general grime of your ancestral world. The other side of the seesaw is the TH2 division. Think of this as your parasite and toxin patrol. Its primary job in our evolutionary past was to deal with big external threats, especially parasitic worms. Its weapons are not designed for precise cellular combat, but for a scorched earth policy. Create massive inflammation to physically expel the invader. This involves releasing a flood of powerful chemicals like histamine to make you itch, sneeze, cough, and swell up, all in an effort to kick the parasite out. In a properly trained immune system, these two divisions are in perfect balance. The constant exposure to everyday germs keeps the TH1 heavy infantry busy and strong, which in turn keeps the more volatile TH2 parasite patrol in check. But in our hyper-clean modern world, the TH1 division has nothing to do. It's a peacetime army that never runs its training drills. As a result, the seesaw becomes permanently imbalanced. The understimulated TH1 side goes up, and the TH2 division becomes dominant, powerful, and dangerously overactive. Now you have a highly armed and trigger-happy parasite patrol with no actual parasites to fight. So it starts looking for other targets. It scans your environment and finds a tiny, harmless particle of pollen. But in its hypervigilant state, it misidentifies that pollen grain as a monstrous parasitic threat. It sounds the alarm and unleashes its entire arsenal, the same overwhelming inflammatory response it would use to expel a tapeworm, all against a speck of dust. Your nose starts running to flush it out. Your eyes water. Your airways constrict. You are, in essence, using a cannon to kill a fly. The same thing happens with the proteins in peanuts, or the dander from a cat, or the droppings of a dust mite in your pillow. The allergy isn't a disease in the traditional sense. It's a friendly fire incident, a catastrophic overreaction from a well-armed but tragically undertrained military. If you need any more proof, look at the fascinating real-world evidence from farm life. Dozens of studies from around the world have shown, consistently, that children who grow up on traditional farms, drinking raw milk and playing in barns with daily exposure to the rich microbial soup of soil and livestock, have dramatically lower rates of allergies and asthma than children who grow up in sterile suburban or city environments. It's not the cleanliness that's protecting us, it's the dirt. The farm is the training ground our immune systems are crying out for. Overreacting to a harmless speck of pollen is one thing. It's a miserable but usually manageable case of mistaken identity. But there is a far darker and more devastating consequence of our undertrained, overactive immune system. It's what happens when the army without a war stops just shooting at shadows on the border and turns its full, destructive power inward. It's what happens when your body attacks itself. This is autoimmunity, and it is perhaps the most tragic and telling of all our modern epidemics. The single most important job of your immune system, beyond fighting off invaders, is to know the difference between self and non-self. It has a sophisticated system of checks and balances to recognize every cell in your body as a citizen to be protected. Autoimmunity is the catastrophic failure of that recognition system. It's a civil war in which your own defense forces begin a systematic and often relentless campaign to destroy your body's own healthy tissues. The army, desperate for an enemy, has declared martial law and identified its own people as insurgents. The list of these diseases is long and growing, and each is a story of a different kind of internal betrayal. In Crohn's disease, the immune system launches an unceasing assault on the lining of your digestive tract. The very system designed to protect you from gut pathogens begins to destroy the infrastructure of your own supply lines, leading to a lifetime of pain and inflammation. In type 1 diabetes, the attack is even more specific and cruelly precise. The immune cells are trained to seek and destroy one very specific target: the tiny, precious beta cells in your pancreas, whose job it is to produce insulin. It is a targeted assassination mission. As these cells are wiped out, your body loses its ability to regulate blood sugar, a condition that, until the discovery of insulin injections, was a death sentence. In multiple sclerosis, the immune system turns on the central nervous system itself. It attacks the delicate myelin sheath that insulates your nerve fibers, the crucial coating that allows electrical signals to travel from your brain to the rest of your body. Think of it as an army of electricians methodically stripping the plastic insulation off every wire in a city's power grid. The signals become scrambled, they short-circuit, and eventually they fail altogether, leading to a progressive loss of muscle control, sensation, and coordination. These are not rare fringe conditions anymore. They are part of a massive, rising tide of chronic illness, often called the diseases of civilization. And while there is certainly a genetic component that makes some people more susceptible, our genes haven't changed in the last 70 years. But the incidence of these diseases has skyrocketed. That rapid increase can only be explained by a drastic change in our environment. This is the grim endgame of the hygiene hypothesis. These devastating conditions are not just random strokes of bad luck. They are the predictable, sorrowful consequence of our evolutionary mismatch. They are the price we pay for our sanitized world. We have created an environment that our ancient immune system simply cannot comprehend. It is an army trained for a world of constant microbial noise, a world of dirt and worms and parasites, now forced to exist in a world of sterile silence. And in that silence, it hears only the ghosts of its old enemies, and it begins to tear the whole house down looking for them. The story of your immune system, this ancient army struggling to make sense of a sterile new world, is missing a central character. We've talked about the lack of outside training, the absence of our old friends from the dirt and the environment. But we haven't yet talked about the most important of these old friends. The ones that don't just live around you, but live inside you. Because you, listening to this right now, are not an individual. You are an ecosystem. You are a walking, talking coral reef, a vast, teeming jungle of life. This is your microbiome. Inside your gut and on your skin and in every corner of your body, you are host to trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, viruses, and archaea. The sheer scale of this inner world is almost impossible to comprehend. In terms of sheer cell count, these microbes outnumber your human cells by at least 10 to 1. Genetically, the difference is even more staggering. You have about 20,000 human genes that code for the person you are. But the collective genes of your microbial inhabitants, your second genome, number in the millions. From a genetic perspective, you are less than 1% human. Our modern germ-phobic culture has taught us to think of bacteria as enemies, as invaders to be sanitized and eradicated. But this is a profound and dangerous misunderstanding of our own biology. These microbes are not invaders. They are our oldest and most intimate partners. We have co-evolved with them for millions of years. We provide them with a warm, stable, nutrient-rich home, and in exchange, they perform a vast array of critical functions that our own human genome simply never learned to do. We outsourced the work. Take the simple act of digestion. You might eat a healthy, fibrous salad, but your own human DNA has the code to produce only a handful of enzymes to break down those complex plant fibers. You can't do it alone. But your gut bacteria possess a veritable library of thousands of different enzymes. They are the master chefs who take the food you can't digest and break it down into life-giving fatty acids and other nutrients that you can then absorb. They also act as tiny internal vitamin factories, manufacturing essential nutrients like vitamin K and many of the B vitamins that your body cannot produce on its own. Crucially, this inner ecosystem is the primary training ground for your immune system. Remember that bored, jumpy army? Your microbiome is its lifelong drill sergeant. It's the constant friendly presence of these trillions of microbes, starting from the moment of your birth, that teaches your immune system the most important lesson of all: tolerance. They train your immune cells to tell the difference between a harmless resident, a beneficial partner, and a genuine threat. Without a diverse and healthy microbiome to provide this education, the immune system never learns to calibrate itself properly, leaving it prone to the overreactions that lead to allergies and autoimmunity. And perhaps most astonishingly, this conversation between you and your inner world doesn't stop at your immune system. It goes all the way up to your brain. Scientists now refer to the gut as our second brain, and have discovered a constant two-way communication highway between them, known as the gut-brain axis. Your gut microbes can produce neurotransmitters, including over 90% of your body's serotonin, the very chemical that regulates your mood. The state of your inner garden can directly influence how you feel, how you handle stress, and even how you think. You are not just a person. You are a planet, and the health of your world depends entirely on the thriving, diverse population you carry within. If you are a planet, a thriving ecosystem of microbial life, then our modern world is an environmental catastrophe. We are, right now, living through a mass extinction event. But this one isn't happening in the Amazon rainforest or on the coral reefs. It's happening inside our own bodies. We have spent the last century systematically and mostly unintentionally destroying our own inner garden. We are starving, poisoning, and sterilizing the ancient microbial partners that are essential to our health. The primary weapon in this assault is our modern diet. Your beneficial gut bacteria, the good guys, have one preferred food source above all others: dietary fiber. Specifically, the complex prebiotic fibers found in a huge variety of vegetables, fruits, legumes, and whole grains. But the modern Western diet is a barren desert for a fiber-loving microbe. It's dominated by processed foods made from sugar, refined flour, and industrial seed oils, foods that are absorbed high up in your digestive tract, leaving nothing behind for the trillions of inhabitants waiting downstream in your colon. We are, quite literally, starving our inner garden. We gorge ourselves on calorie-rich foods, while our most important biological partners starve to death by the billion. As if starvation wasn't enough, we also periodically poison them. The invention of antibiotics was one of the greatest medical achievements in history. saving countless lives from deadly infections. But they are a blunt and brutal instrument. When you take a broad-spectrum antibiotic, it's like carpet bombing your inner rainforest. It wipes out not just the 1 or 2 bad bacteria causing your infection, but also vast, innocent populations of the beneficial species you have cultivated your entire life. While the ecosystem can sometimes recover, it is often a slow and incomplete process, like a forest after a devastating fire. Certain sensitive species may be lost forever. And our assault doesn't stop there. The chlorine in our drinking water, the preservatives in our packaged foods, the antibacterial agents in our soaps and cleaning supplies, each is a small but cumulative blow against our microbial diversity. We have created a lifestyle that not only prevents us from acquiring new, beneficial microbes from our environment, but also actively harms the precious few that remain. This isn't just a theory. It is a measurable, scientific fact. Researchers have embarked on remarkable journeys to the most remote corners of the globe to collect samples from people who live outside the industrialized world. They have studied the microbiomes of traditional hunter-gatherer groups like the Yanomami people of the Amazon and the Hadza of Tanzania. And what they've found is staggering. These people, living a life closer to that of our ancestors, have a microbial diversity that dwarfs our own. Their inner ecosystems are a vibrant, resilient jungle, teeming with hundreds of species that are rare or completely absent in the guts of the average Westerner. The data suggests that we in the industrialized world have lost somewhere between 10 and 50% of our ancestral microbial diversity. We are living with a depleted, impoverished inner world, and the consequences of this internal ecological collapse are becoming increasingly clear. Scientists now believe that this loss of diversity is a key contributing factor, a prime suspect in many of our most vexing modern chronic illnesses. From inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's, to the epidemics of obesity and metabolic syndrome, and even to the rising rates of depression and anxiety. All have been linked back to the health and diversity of the invisible world within. We cannot expect the planet of our body to be healthy when we have clear-cut its forests and poisoned its rivers. Now let's tie these invisible worlds together by returning to a strange and subtle clue, a mystery hidden in plain sight inside your own body. For over a century, the gold standard for a normal human body temperature has been 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or 37 degrees Celsius. It's a number we all learned in school. But it's wrong. Or rather, it's out of date. Recent studies, analyzing medical records stretching back nearly 200 years, have confirmed a slow but steady decline. The new normal, the average temperature for a healthy human today, is closer to 97.9 degrees. We are, as a species, cooling down. And the reasons for this quiet change lie in the heart of the story we've just been exploring. The key to this puzzle is inflammation. The constant vigilant activity of your immune system is one of the main drivers of your basal metabolic rate. It takes a huge amount of energy to keep that army on patrol, and energy expenditure generates heat. Inflammation, the immune system's primary response to threats, is a particularly hot and metabolically expensive process. Think of the heat radiating from an infected wound. That's inflammation at work. Even low-grade chronic inflammation humming along in the background acts like a tiny internal furnace, dialing up your body's overall thermostat. Now think of your pre-industrial ancestors. They lived in a state of constant low-grade immune activation. Their bodies were perpetually fighting off parasites, gut infections, rotting teeth, and systemic diseases like tuberculosis. Their immune furnaces were always simmering. This constant inflammatory burden was likely a major reason their average body temperature was higher. Our modern world, with its clean water, sanitation, and medical care, has dramatically lifted this ancient burden. We have fewer infections, less disease, and therefore less of the chronic, infection-driven inflammation that kept our ancestors running hot. Our cooler bodies are a physiological signature of our cleaner, sanitized world. But here is where the story gets more complex, because it's not just about the external world. Your microbiome is a key player in this thermal story. A healthy, diverse inner ecosystem is one of your body's most powerful anti-inflammatory forces. It helps maintain the integrity of your gut lining, preventing inflammatory molecules from leaking into your bloodstream. It actively communicates with your immune cells, teaching them tolerance and helping to regulate their response. So, while we have less inflammation coming from outside infections, the damage we've done to our microbiome may be contributing to the rise of the inappropriate inflammation that drives autoimmune disease. The furnace is no longer being fueled by outside invaders, but by a dysfunctional internal government. And so, this simple fact, a drop of less than a single degree, becomes a powerful summary for this entire chapter of our journey. It beautifully ties together the threads of our relationship with the invisible worlds. First, we sanitized our external world, removing the dirt, germs, and parasites that had been our constant companions for eons. This, in turn, left our internal immune world, that ancient army, undertrained, bored, and dangerously overreactive. Finally, this dysfunction was made even worse by the catastrophic collapse of our internal microbial world, the very ecosystem that was supposed to be the immune system's wisest teacher and most trusted regulator. This chain reaction, from the world around us to the army within us to the garden inside us, is the engine of our modern inflammatory diseases. The cooling of the human body is the quiet, paradoxical fever chart of our success and our failure. We've explored the invisible worlds inside our bodies, our minds, our immune systems, our microbial partners. Now let's turn our attention to the primary gateway through which we perceive the outside world, our sense of sight. Because the story of our evolving backwards is not just written in our bones or our blood. It's visible in the ever-increasing number of us who can no longer see the world clearly without a technological fix. We are living through a global epidemic, one that is silently unfolding right in front of our eyes. This is the epidemic of myopia, or nearsightedness. For the vast majority of our history, our eyes had one primary job: to see far. Your survival on the savannah depended on your ability to scan the distant horizon, to spot the subtle flicker of a predator's tail in the tall grass, or the distant silhouette of a migrating herd. The natural default state for your eye's focusing muscle was to be completely relaxed, effortlessly focused on infinity. Close-up work, like sharpening a spear point or mending a hide, was an occasional, short-duration task. For 99.9% of your time as a species, you lived your life looking out, across vast and open spaces. Your eyes were built for distance. Now, consider the visual world of a modern human. From our earliest days in school, we are trained to stare for hours at books and papers just inches from our face. We graduate to a life spent in front of computer screens, our gaze fixed on a point 2 feet away, and we fill the moments in between by staring down into the tiny, glowing rectangle of a smartphone. We live our lives inside a visual box, We have taken an organ designed for the infinite horizon and trapped it in a prison of perpetual near focus. This profound environmental mismatch has a direct, physical consequence on the eye itself, especially as it develops during childhood and adolescence. When you focus on something up close, a tiny muscle inside your eye called the ciliary muscle has to contract to change the shape of your lens. When a growing, pliable eye is forced to spend thousands of hours in this state of sustained contraction, the eye itself begins to adapt. It receives a signal that says, "It seems the world is always close to my face. I should change my shape to make this easier." And so the eyeball begins to elongate. It grows from a perfect sphere into a slightly stretched, egg-like shape. This physical change in the eyeball's length is what causes myopia. Light from distant objects now comes to a focus not on the light-sensitive retina at the back of the eye, but in front of it. The result is that the close-up world remains sharp, but the distant world, the world your eyes were originally built to see, dissolves into an indecipherable blur. Your glasses or contact lenses are not just a helpful accessory. They are a corrective lens designed to compensate for the fact that your environment has physically reshaped your eyeball. The scientific evidence for this is overwhelming. This is not primarily a genetic problem, it's an environmental one. A century ago, myopia was a relatively rare condition. Today, in many developed nations, it affects nearly half the population. In some cities in East Asia, driven by intense educational pressures that keep children indoors and focused on books from a very young age, the rates are staggering. As high as 80 to 90% of young adults are now nearsighted. Our genes haven't changed in 3 generations. Our behavior has. Studies have also shown that one of the most powerful protective factors against developing myopia is simply time spent outdoors as a child. It's not entirely clear why, but it seems that gazing at distant objects and exposure to the bright, full-spectrum light of the sun provides the necessary signals for the eye to develop properly. We have, in our enclosed and screen-filled world, created the perfect environment to blur our own vision. The blur of modernity isn't just confined to our vision. It extends deep within to the very way our bodies process the energy we consume. We have developed a profound metabolic confusion, a disconnect between the instructions in our ancient genetic cookbook and the strange new ingredients we are providing. This confusion has a name: metabolic syndrome. It's not a single disease, but a deadly cluster of conditions. High blood sugar, high blood pressure, excess fat around the waist, and unhealthy cholesterol levels. Together, they are the royal road to the great chronic diseases of our time: heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. And the story of why this is happening begins, once again, on the savannah. For your ancestors, life was an endless cycle of feast and famine. A successful hunt might provide a huge influx of calories for a few days, but this would inevitably be followed by long, lean periods of scarcity. In this world, natural selection would have fiercely favored individuals with what biologists call a thrifty genotype. This was a set of genes that made you incredibly efficient at 2 things: extracting every possible calorie from the food you ate, and, crucially, converting any surplus energy into body fat with ruthless efficiency. Fat was not the enemy, it was your savings account, your life insurance policy. The individuals who were best at getting fat during the rare times of plenty were the ones who survived the inevitable famines that followed. Your body is the product of survivors. It is exquisitely designed to store energy to protect you from a scarcity that never comes. Now, Contrast that ancient reality with our modern food environment. You live in a world of perpetual, unprecedented, 24/7 feast. You have constant access to a tsunami of cheap, delicious, and calorie-dense foods that would have been the stuff of wild fantasy for your ancestors. A single trip to a supermarket or a fast food restaurant can provide more sugar and fat than your hunter-gatherer great-grandparents might have seen in a month. We have successfully engineered the famine part of the cycle completely out of existence. Our thrifty genes, the very superpower that ensured our survival for millennia, are now a profound liability. They are a brilliant adaptation to a world that no longer exists. The mechanism through which this superpower turns into a curse is a process called insulin resistance. Think of insulin as your body's master storage hormone. When you eat a meal, particularly one high in carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises. In response, your pancreas releases insulin, which acts like a key, knocking on the door of your cells and telling them to open up and take in the sugar from your blood to use for energy or to store for later as fat. This system worked perfectly in the ancestral world, where a significant hit of sugar was a rare treat, like finding a beehive. But in our modern world, we bombard this system day after day, meal after meal, with a flood of refined carbohydrates and sugar. Your pancreas is forced to pump out huge amounts of insulin all day long to deal with this relentless sugary tide. And your cells, like a person being shouted at constantly, eventually start to go deaf. They stop listening to insulin's knock. They become resistant to its signal. This is insulin resistance. As your cells become deaf, your pancreas has to shout even louder, producing even more insulin to try and get the message through. This creates a vicious cycle of chronically high blood sugar and chronically high insulin, which is the direct pathway to a host of metabolic problems. Your body, in a desperate attempt to protect you from a famine that is never coming, ends up creating the very conditions that make you sick in this world of endless plenty. This story of our thrifty genes colliding with the modern world feels like a slow, deep time process, a mismatch written in the ancient code of our DNA. But what if I told you there's another layer to this story? A mechanism that allows the environment to interact with your genes in real time, changing how they behave within your own lifetime? This is the revolutionary and mind-bending science of epigenetics, and it makes our story of evolving backwards far more immediate and far more personal. Think of your DNA, your genetic code, as a vast and ancient cookbook. This book contains tens of thousands of recipes, the genes, for building and operating every part of you. You inherited this cookbook from your parents, who got it from theirs, stretching all the way back into the mists of time. For the most part, you can't rewrite the recipes themselves. But this is where epigenetics comes in. Epigenetics is the chef. The chef can't change the words on the page, but they can decide which recipes to cook and how often. The chef can take a highlighter and mark a recipe as important, making it more likely to be read. They can put a sticky note on a page, or even clip 2 pages together, making a recipe harder to access. These highlights and sticky notes are epigenetic marks. They don't change the code. They change the expression of the code. These marks are real physical tags that attach to your DNA. They are chemical signals that tell your cellular machinery which genes to turn on, which to turn off, which to turn up like a dimmer switch, and which to turn down. And what influences the chef's decisions? Your life, your diet, your stress levels, how much you exercise, the quality of your sleep, the toxins you're exposed to. Every aspect of your environment is sending instructions to your epigenome, telling it which of your ancient genetic recipes are most needed right now. You are, in every moment, conducting the beautiful and complex symphony of your own gene expression. For a long time, scientists believed that this epigenetic slate was wiped clean for every new generation. It was thought that when you have a child, you pass on the cookbook, but none of your personal highlights or sticky notes. We now know that this is not entirely true. In a process that we are only just beginning to understand, some of these epigenetic marks can survive the wipe. They can be passed down, from parent to child, and sometimes even to grandchild. This is called transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, and its implications are profound. It means that the experiences of your ancestors might be written, not in your genes, but in the way your genes are read. Studies on populations that have endured severe famine, for example, have shown that the children and even grandchildren of the survivors can carry epigenetic marks that alter their metabolism, pre-tuning them for a world of scarcity. It means that the backwards changes we are experiencing are not just a slow-motion collision between our Paleolithic genes and our modern world. They are also happening in fast forward. The lifestyle choices you make today are writing notes in the margins of your own genetic cookbook. And there is a chance that the cookbook you hand down to your children will come with some of your notes still faintly visible, subtly influencing the way their story is told. This idea that our environment is actively writing on our genes brings us to a provocative and deeply unsettling question. If our world is changing us so profoundly, what are we becoming? We discussed earlier how our brains may have shrunk as a result of us becoming tamer, more cooperative. But what if that was just one symptom of a much larger process? What if we look at all the changes we've discussed so far? The shrinking, hollowing bones, the smaller jaws, the less aggressive minds, and see them not as separate issues, but as a single, unified pattern? What if the story of the last 10,000 years, the story of civilization, is the story of human domestication? Think of any domesticated animal and compare it to its wild ancestor. A cow to a wild aurochs, a pig to a wild boar, a dog to a grey wolf. In every case, you see a similar suite of changes, a pattern known as the domestication syndrome. Domesticated animals are universally less aggressive and more docile than their wild cousins. Their skeletons are more gracile, that is, lighter and less robust. They often have smaller teeth and shorter faces, and almost without exception, they have smaller brains. Now, hold that pattern up to the mirror we've been building of ourselves. We too have developed lighter, more gracile skeletons, a trend that began the moment we settled onto the farm. Our faces and jaws have become smaller, our teeth more crowded. Our brains have shrunk, and our entire society is built on a foundation of suppressing the kind of raw, individualistic aggression that would have been essential for survival in the wild. Civilization, with its laws, its social contracts, and its dense populations, is a system that overwhelmingly rewards docility, cooperation, and social tolerance. The parallels are striking and hard to ignore. We even show signs of neoteny, which is the retention of juvenile or childlike features into adulthood. Just as a dog often resembles a juvenile wolf, modern humans, with our flatter faces and less pronounced brow ridges, look more like the juvenile versions of our ancient ancestors. If we accept this premise, it begs the question, if we are domesticated, who is the farmer? The answer, of course, is that we are. We have domesticated ourselves. We traded the fierce, unpredictable freedom of the wild for the safety and predictability of the pen. We are no longer wild animals, subject to the harsh, purifying pressures of natural selection. We are more like farm animals. We are utterly dependent on a vast, complex system, civilization itself, to provide us with food, shelter, and protection. In return, we have given up our wildness, our robustness, and perhaps a piece of our very nature. The farmer is the intricate web of culture, technology, and social norms that we have been weaving for millennia, a web that has tamed the wild ape within. Of course, this is a powerful and perhaps imperfect metaphor. Scholars and anthropologists actively debate whether self-domestication is a helpful scientific analogy, or if it oversimplifies the incredibly complex forces of gene-culture co-evolution. After all, we are the only animal that is both the livestock and the farmer, a paradox that complicates the entire picture. But as an idea, it provides a chillingly coherent framework for all the backwards changes we've seen. It suggests we are not just adapting to a new world, but that we are being fundamentally remade by it, transformed from the wild, formidable creature on the savanna into something altogether tamer, more dependent, and more fragile. This process of domestication hasn't just made our bodies more fragile, it has fundamentally altered the social fabric of our lives, creating a profound psychological mismatch. For the entire history of our species, leading up to the blink of an eye that is civilization, the human experience was an intensely social one. We didn't just live near other people. Our very survival was woven into the daily, cooperative life of a small, tight-knit group. Picture the social world your brain was built for. You lived in a band of perhaps 20 to 50 people, a multi-generational family of parents, children, cousins, and elders. You knew every single person intimately, their strengths, their weaknesses, their histories. Your life was one of constant face-to-face interaction and mutual dependence. Sharing food wasn't a virtue, it was the bedrock of your economy. Raising children wasn't a private task, it was a communal responsibility. You were never truly alone. Your brain, your emotions, your very sense of self were forged in this crucible of deep, inescapable community. There's even a biological basis for the size of this ancestral community. The British anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed that there is a cognitive limit to the number of people with whom you can maintain stable, meaningful social relationships. Based on the size of the human neocortex, he calculated that this number is around 150. And fascinatingly, this number pops up everywhere in human organization, from the size of Neolithic villages to modern military companies. Dunbar's number suggests that your social brain has a natural carrying capacity. It is wired for a village. Now hold that image of the ancestral village against the reality of modern life. Many of us now live in anonymous megacities, surrounded by millions of strangers. We might have thousands of friends or followers on social media, but these connections are often thin and disembodied, lacking the physical presence and tangible support of a true tribe. We have traded the deep, narrow bonds of the band for the shallow, wide connections of the network. We exist in a state of hyper-individualism, where the focus is on personal achievement and self-reliance rather than the collective good of the group. This creates a profound evolutionary mismatch, and the result is a silent, creeping epidemic, one that is as damaging to our health as any physical ailment: the epidemic of loneliness. To be clear, loneliness is not the same as solitude. It's the distressing feeling of being socially isolated, the painful gap between the meaningful connections you desire and the ones you actually have. It's the feeling of being in a lonely crowd. This modern ache is not a personal failing or a sign of weakness. It is a biological distress signal. Your brain, wired over millennia for the rich, constant social feedback of a small tribe, now finds itself adrift in a sea of anonymous faces and fleeting digital interactions. That feeling of loneliness is the evolutionary equivalent of hunger or thirst. It is a primal alarm bell telling you that a critical survival need, the need for deep social connection, is not being met. It's a kind of phantom limb pain for the social body we no longer have. We were built for the village, but we woke up in the crowd. Now we've spent a long time on this journey together, painting what might feel like a rather bleak and pessimistic picture. We've seen our skeletons weaken, our jaws shrink, our immune systems grow confused, and our minds become distracted. It's easy to listen to all of this and conclude that the story of humanity is now one of simple, inexorable decline. But that's not the whole story. It's a huge and important part of it. But evolution is never that simple. It is not a single monolithic force pushing our entire species in one direction. While the comfort and safety of civilization are causing many of our ancient traits to atrophy, that same civilization is creating new and intense pressures that are forging us in completely different directions. Evolution is not just happening backwards, it's happening forwards and sideways, all at the same time. One of the most powerful examples of this is written in a glass of milk. For the vast majority of human history, and for all other mammals on Earth, the gene for producing lactase, the enzyme that digests the sugar in milk, switches off after weaning. As adults, we were all meant to be lactose intolerant. But about 10,000 years ago, some groups of our ancestors began to do something new. They domesticated cattle and started drinking their milk. In these populations, a random genetic mutation that kept the lactase gene switched on into adulthood suddenly became an incredible advantage. It provided a rich, new source of calories, protein, and fat. These lactose-tolerant individuals were healthier, stronger, and likely had more surviving children. This trait spread like wildfire. What's truly amazing is that this didn't just happen once. It evolved independently in several different places, from Europe to the Middle East and parts of Africa. It's a perfect example of us adapting, in a forward direction, to a new technology we invented. Let's look at another, more extreme environment. For thousands of years, people have lived on the high plateaus of Tibet and the Andes, miles above sea level, where the air is dangerously thin. If you, a lowlander, were to move there, your body would struggle, producing more red blood cells to try and capture more oxygen, which dangerously thickens the blood. But native Tibetans have evolved a far more elegant solution. Thanks to a variant of a gene called EPS1, their bodies don't just make more red blood cells, they have become exquisitely efficient at using the little oxygen that is available. It is a subtle, beautiful, and life-saving adaptation to an environment that would kill most of us. Or consider the Sama-Bajau people of Southeast Asia. Often called sea nomads, they are a remarkable group of marine hunter-gatherers who spend much of their lives on the water, diving for food. Over centuries, they have developed an incredible ability to hold their breath for stunning lengths of time. And it's not just training, it's genetics. Scientists have discovered that the Sama-Bajau have evolved, through natural selection, to have significantly larger spleens than neighboring populations. Your spleen acts as a biological scuba tank, storing a reserve of oxygenated red blood cells. During a dive, the spleen can contract, releasing this oxygen-rich blood into the circulation and extending time underwater. It is a brand new, uniquely human adaptation, evolving right now in response to a unique cultural lifestyle. So what does this all mean? It means that we are not simply de-evolving, we are specializing. The story of human evolution has become a story of trade-offs. We have traded the robust, all-purpose body of a wild generalist for a collection of more fragile, specialized bodies, each adapting to its own unique niche, whether that niche is a dairy farm in ancient Europe, a high-altitude plateau in Tibet, or a modern world of soft foods and digital screens. Our story isn't a straight line. It's a messy, complicated, and glorious branching out into 1,000 new forms of being human. Our story has shown that evolution is not a relic of the past, but a living, breathing force that is constantly reshaping us in response to our environment. But all the changes we've discussed so far, whether forwards, sideways, or backwards, have been driven by the same ancient, impersonal forces of natural selection and environmental pressure that have governed life for billions of years. Now, we are standing on the threshold of a new era. For the first time in the history of life on Earth, a species is about to seize control of its own evolutionary destiny. We are moving from being the subjects of evolution to becoming its authors. The tool that has unlocked this godlike power is a revolutionary technology called CRISPR. You can think of it as a biological find and replace function for the code of life. It's a pair of molecular scissors guided by a programmable address that can travel to any specific point in your 3 billion letter-long genome, make a precise cut, and then either delete, repair, or replace a specific genetic sequence. Its discovery has opened a door that can never again be closed. The promise of this technology is breathtaking, and it begins with the potential to eradicate some of humanity's most cruel and devastating genetic diseases. Consider a condition like sickle cell anemia, caused by a single tiny typo in the gene for hemoglobin. CRISPR offers the genuine possibility of correcting that typo in a patient's own blood stem cells, potentially offering a complete cure. Think of Huntington's disease, a fatal and inescapable neurodegenerative disorder caused by a single faulty gene. With a technology like CRISPR, we can imagine a future where we could simply delete that malicious line of code from an embryo's genome, freeing an entire family line from its curse forever. In this context, using our newfound power seems like a clear moral good. But the line between curing a disease and enhancing a trait is treacherously thin and blurry. And this is where we step into the profound ethical territory of the designer gene. If we can fix a gene that causes a muscle-wasting disease, what's to stop us from editing a different gene to promote greater muscle growth in a healthy person? If we can correct a genetic defect that leads to intellectual disability, what's to stop us from trying to tweak the complex array of genes associated with higher intelligence? What happens when parents can not only screen for diseases, but can begin to choose traits for their children from a genetic catalog, selecting for height, athleticism, or even eye color? This power has the potential to cleave our species in two. We could create a future of genetic haves and have-nots, a world where the wealthy can afford to give their children a biological advantage, creating a permanent inherited class divide written not in bank accounts, but in the DNA itself. We also risk the unforeseen consequences of our own hubris. The genome is an impossibly complex, interconnected ecosystem. Editing a gene for one desired outcome could have disastrous, unintended side effects that we might not discover for generations. And so we are faced with the ultimate question, one that no other species has ever had to ask. Who gets to decide what a better human is? For 4 billion years, that question was answered by the blind, impartial, and often brutal logic of natural selection. The environment decided who was fit. Now, that awesome, terrifying power is passing into our own very human, very fallible hands. We are, for the very first time, becoming the architects of ourselves. While we grapple with the immense power of editing our own genetic code, another, perhaps even more radical, evolutionary path is emerging. It's a path that doesn't seek to perfect our biology, but to transcend it altogether. It's the story of how we might merge with our own technology, blurring the line between flesh and machine until it disappears completely. This is the world of transhumanism, and it offers a final, startling solution to the evolutionary mismatch that has been the theme of our entire journey. The first steps on this path are already being taken. We see it in the sophisticated prosthetic limbs that can be controlled by a person's thoughts, restoring a sense of touch and movement that was once thought lost forever. We see it in cochlear implants that translate digital signals directly into the sensation of sound, and in artificial retinas that promise to bring a form of sight to the blind. These technologies start as therapy, as a way to restore a lost function. But the same technology that can restore can also enhance. Where does healing end and upgrading begin? This question becomes even more profound when we consider the ultimate merger, the brain-computer interface, or BCI. Technologies currently in development, like Elon Musk's Neuralink, aim to create a direct, high-bandwidth connection between the neurons in your brain and a digital computer. The initial goals are noble and therapeutic, to allow someone who is paralyzed to control a cursor or a robotic limb with their mind, or to restore speech to someone who has lost it. But the long-term vision is one of total symbiosis. Imagine a future where you don't need to type a search query into a phone. You simply think the question, and the answer appears in your mind's eye, drawn from the collective knowledge of the internet. Imagine being able to download a new skill, a foreign language, a complex mathematical concept, as easily as you download an app. What would it be like to communicate with another person, not through the clumsy, limited medium of spoken words, but through a direct, telepathic transfer of thoughts, ideas, and emotions? This is the ultimate vision of the BCI, to merge human consciousness with the power of artificial intelligence. And in this vision, you can see the ultimate escape from the mismatch that has plagued us. For this entire journey, we have explored the problems that arise when our ancient Paleolithic bodies are forced to live in a modern, technological world. We've seen our bones weaken, our immune systems falter, and our metabolisms crumble. The transhumanist solution is as simple as it is radical. If our biology doesn't fit the environment, then let's just get rid of the biology. Why struggle with the limitations of a body that evolved for the savanna when you can build a new one? Why be susceptible to disease and aging when you can replace failing organs with superior mechanical versions? Why be confined to the limited senses of an ape when you can have eyes that see in infrared and ears that can hear ultrasonic frequencies? This path offers a way to leave behind all our biological baggage, our frailties, our sicknesses, and perhaps even the ultimate limitation of death itself. But it also leads us to a final, profound question. If you systematically replace the parts of what makes you human, your body, your senses, perhaps even the neurons in your brain, at what point do you stop being a Homo sapiens and become something new, something post-human? But there is one final frontier, one last great migration that could reshape us in ways we can barely imagine. It's the path that leads not inward, through the code of our genes or the circuits of our machines, but outward into the silent, star-filled darkness of space. What happens when we take this ancient, earth-bound body and transplant it into the truly alien environments of other worlds? The story of human evolution, which began on the hot plains of Africa, may find its next chapter written in the red dust of Mars. At its core, this is the ultimate evolutionary mismatch. You are an ape in a spaceship. Every fiber of your being, every metabolic pathway, every bone in your body has been exquisitely sculpted by the specific conditions of this planet. Its 24-hour day, its thick atmosphere, and most importantly, its constant, reassuring gravitational pull. To leave Earth is to leave behind the very environmental womb that created us. It would be the start of a new and intense wave of evolutionary pressure, a biological test on a cosmic scale. Imagine a permanent human colony on Mars. Life there would be lived under just 38% of Earth's gravity. From the moment the first child is born in that low-gravity environment, a new evolutionary story would begin. The selective pressures that shaped us here would be turned on their head. Remember Wolff's Law, the principle that our bones need the stress of gravity to remain strong. On Mars, the message your skeleton would receive every moment of every day is that its heavy, dense structure is overkill. It's metabolically expensive and unnecessary. Natural selection would immediately favor individuals with lighter, more gracile skeletons. The same would be true for our muscles. The powerful legs and core that evolved to hold us upright against Earth's pull would be needlessly large. Selection would favor a leaner, less muscular physique. Over generations, a new human form would emerge, taller, thinner, with bones as delicate as a bird's. These Martians would be perfectly adapted to their new home, but they might become prisoners of it, their bodies so finely tuned to low gravity that a return trip to the crushing embrace of Earth would be impossible. We are already seeing hints of these changes in our astronauts. They return from even short stints in space with measurable bone density loss, muscle atrophy, and strange changes to their vision, as the fluid in their bodies shifts in the absence of gravity. In a permanent off-world colony, these would not be temporary medical conditions to be rehabilitated. They would be the new normal, the raw material for natural selection to work with. This journey into space would be a perfect, high-speed recapitulation of our entire evolutionary past. Just as your ancestors walked out of Africa and adapted to the different climates of Earth, developing new skin tones, body shapes, and metabolic traits, so too would our descendants walk off Earth and adapt to the different conditions of new worlds. The humans who settle Mars will, over time, become Martians. Those who live in the spinning habitats of the asteroid belt or the low-gravity moons of Jupiter will become something else entirely. We will be seeding the solar system not just with our presence, but with our potential to become new and wonderfully diverse forms of humanity. The great branching bush of our evolution, which for a brief moment seemed to be narrowing, would explode into the cosmos. And so, after this long journey, from the ancient savanna to the surface of Mars, from the code in your DNA to the circuits of a computer, we arrive back here, in the quiet of this room. We are left with this strange, complex, and often contradictory story of ourselves. And we can see at last that the phrase evolving backwards is not quite right. It's a powerful metaphor, but it implies a judgment, a sense of failure. And evolution does not judge. It simply adapts. We are not failing. We are, as we have always been, merely adapting to the environment we find ourselves in. The profound, unsettling difference is that the environment is one of our own creation. We have built ourselves a world of unprecedented safety and comfort, a world without predators, without famine, without the constant, grinding physical hardship that defined 99% of our existence. And in response, our bodies have simply done what they are programmed to do. They have shed the costly biological armor that is no longer needed. The dense bones, the powerful jaws, the hyper-vigilant immune system, these were adaptations for a world of danger and scarcity. In our new world, they are expensive luxuries, and so, slowly, they are being retired. The frailties we now experience are not new flaws. They are the ghosts of our wild past. They are the revelation of ancient dependencies we never knew we had. We were always dependent on the stress of gravity to keep our bones strong. Our comfortable chairs just revealed that fact. We were always dependent on a dirty world to properly train our immune systems. Our sanitized homes just revealed that fact. Each modern ailment is an echo, a whisper from a world we have left behind, reminding us of the wild creature we still are, deep down. We have recapped the great arc of this journey. We started as that magnificent hunter, perfectly fitted to a wild world. We fell into the agricultural trap, trading the quality of our health for the quantity of our food. We watched our bodies shrink and our faces narrow, creating a host of modern problems. We explored the mystery of our downsizing but reorganizing brains, and the quiet confusion of our internal armies. And we have stared over the precipice of a future where we might seize the reins of our own evolution through genetics, technology, or even by leaving this world behind entirely. It leaves us as we are now, a creature of profound paradox. You are a Stone Age hunter living in a technological wonderland. Your mind holds the ancient instincts of the savanna, while your hands hold a device that connects you to the entire galaxy of human knowledge. You are a wild animal living in a zoo of your own design. You are an ape in a spaceship. And the story of what you become next is not yet written. The great, sprawling, messy epic of human evolution is far from over. And so, our long journey through time comes to a gentle close. The echoes of the ancient savanna can now fade, mingling with the soft, steady hum of your own quiet world. These grand stories of our species, of bones and brains and the silent dance of our genes, are not meant to trouble your sleep, but to deepen your sense of connection to the long, unbroken chain of life that has led directly to you, here, in this moment. The frailties and the strengths, the paradoxes and the triumphs, are all part of the incredible story of being human. And now, there is nothing left to do, nothing left to analyze, but to simply let go. Let the images dissolve. Let the thoughts drift away like clouds. Feel the gentle weight of your body, secure and at peace. The story is over, and it is time for you to rest.